Good morning, everybody, and welcome to What's Real in Real Estate, where we talk about what's really happening in the real estate industry in Las Vegas, around the country, around the world. I'm Elie Morris with Signature Real Estate Group, and I'm so excited to have our guest today, Joe Brezny. Joe, thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And we'll take a few minutes. I want to talk to everybody about what's going on in the market, because the market's getting a little crazy right now. I spoke with a lot, and I'm not a prognosticator by any stretch of the imagination, but for the last many months, I've been telling people, don't wait for rates to go down. If and when they do, come springtime, we're going to see, there's been so much pent-up demand that we're going to see a lot of people wanting to come out, and it's happening. And now we're seeing multiple offers. I just had one where my buyer was willing to pay over the appraised value out of pocket. And then someone came in and even went over higher.
Wow.
So it's getting bad, and I'm telling you, if you're complaining about 7% interest rates, how about 100% interest when renting?
Yeah.
So, get out there, buy. And this guy that was getting frustrated, he thought, maybe I'll just rent again. And I said, if you rent, you're going to pay $2,000 a month. That's $24,000 next year. Mm-hmm. At least if you buy, you've got something at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But it's just a mess. So folks, get out there, just get something. Get in the market, get something. But it's a crazy thing. But I can't tell you how excited I am to have Joe on here today. Joe's with Carrera, Nevada. And give everybody a little background on just who you are, Joe.
I worked for years in partisan politics on the Republican side here in Nevada. I served as the executive director of the state Senate caucus, and so I managed operations for all of the state senators up at the legislature and then helped on their campaigns. Then in 2010, I became an independent myself and also went into independent politics when I started working for Carrera, Nevada. Since then, we don't do candidate campaigns. I still work on campaigns, but we found that there was no one taking up the lane of independent expenditure campaigns, issues mobilization campaigns, and ballot measures. And as we got more and more into that line of the business, we figured out that it's really unique. It takes a unique skill set. It takes a unique way of thinking and a unique approach. And so we have been in that lane since 2010. And so we've done the marijuana ballot initiative in 2016. We did the Yes on 3 ballot question for open primaries and ranked choice voting last year. And then we do independent expenditure campaigns every year. And so I primarily work in campaign operations, but not directly for candidates.
Okay. Are you from Las Vegas?
No, I was born in the Midwest. I was born in Pittsburgh, spent time in West Virginia. My dad was a coal mining engineer there, and then moved to Columbus, Ohio. I went to high school there, and then college in Ohio, and then came out to Nevada after that. But I've lived in Nevada since 2001, and it's funny because moving around so much growing up, I've lived in Nevada 4 or 5 times as long as I've lived anywhere else.
Funny.
It's been the place that I've definitely got the most roots.
What school did you go to in Ohio?
Miami University.
Oh,
Ohio.
sure.
Little school, little town called Oxford. It's in the middle of a bunch of cornfields.
I'm from Michigan.
Oh, okay.
So,
hey, congratulations on the win this year.
Yeah. I'm not a big Michigan fan. They're a little arrogant for me. Sorry, folks out there. But I'm certainly not an Ohio State fan, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you a short, funny story. I think it's funny. When I was calling a furniture rep, and I had to go call on Lazarus department store.
Oh, yeah, Lazarus.
In Columbus.
Yeah, that was big.
Well, the week I was going was the week of the big game in Columbus.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought, man, there's no question. My car's going to get keyed.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen. Both Michigan plates are there.
Yeah.
Nothing happened, of course.
Okay.
But I really thought something was going to happen because there was such an intense rivalry.
Yeah. It's crazy. We made friends with another campaign operative when I first moved here, and he had been a football player for UNLV. And so a couple of us took him back to an Ohio State game.
Oh, boy.
It just blew his mind. And he said afterward, it's not the 100,000 people inside the stadium that were amazing. They were. He said, but the most amazing thing was the other 100,000 people that come down to the stadium for all of the tailgate parties around the stadium.
Yeah.
Midwestern football is something on a different level.
You always hear about Texas and the South, but you're right. Midwestern football, some serious stuff, man.
Oh, you want to see serious football? Go to rural West Virginia. There's several
really?
towns in rural West Virginia. You have a town that has 7,000 people, and the high school football stadium seats 10,000 people because the other town of 7,000 people down the road, the whole town comes down to watch the game.
I'll bet.
It is rural West Virginia football is like nothing. It's like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I can imagine. High school and college, high school football especially, really is big in this country.
Yep. Yep.
Everywhere you go. Well, look, you are so involved in the politics side of real estate and a lot of things. I had a couple things I wanted to talk about. Some that I think are important to people. They're sure important to me, and one of them is the water issue. You know a lot about it. I've heard you talk about it. Give us your thoughts on water and where we are and where we're going.
Well, I think to look at it from a really high level, Las Vegas is positioned really well in a Colorado River system that overall is positioned really not well. Las Vegas has been very aggressive with conservation measures. We're one of the most water smart cities in the world, if not the most water smart city.
I've heard that.
It's us and Singapore are kind of tied, but we use a lot of the same techniques that they do, and so being so water smart and our water reclamation process and taking 98% of the indoor water use and getting it back into the system and getting credits for that, we ask regularly, are we getting to a point where you're going to stop issuing building permits because there's no water? And they're telling us no. They're telling us no, not yet. The rest of the Colorado River system, which governs us overall, because they say whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. We could have 5 of these podcasts just on water, but water's for fighting. And so when we all get squeezed, we get squeezed too. And so, but there's a lot of things about the Colorado River system that people don't realize. People say things like, why does the Bellagio have fountains when we're in a water crisis? And it's because first, I think that water comes from their well, but the other thing is Nevada uses a minuscule amount of Colorado River water, 330,000 acre feet.
It's like 3.1% of all the usage, isn't it?
Correct. Well, and actually, it's 3.1% of the lower basin usage.
Okay.
So you cut that in half again. So we're at like less than 2%. So if you want to talk about the Colorado River system, it's agriculture. 70% of the Colorado River system is used for agricultural water. And so that's the biggest user. That's where the biggest pinch is going to be. And so far, everyone has been fighting over who gets what little scraps are there. And that's going to be a necessary thing until we fix the other side of the equation. The problem that we've got is the other side of the equation, which is increasing the supply of water to the Colorado River, has been talked about before by probably the smartest person on Colorado River issues, which is Pat Mulroy, former director of SNWA. And the thing is, she was actually prescient about this. I mean, back in like 2010, she was saying, we need a stormwater pipeline from the Mississippi River Basin to the Colorado River Basin. And people talked about how it would be like $10 or $20 billion, which would be a bargain. We would love if it was only $10 or $20 billion today. But everyone said it was crazy. Well, the crazy ideas aren't crazy anymore.
I think it's a great idea, but I've heard some of the cost is a backlash.
Yeah.
But from what I've read and heard, that every year that water in the Mississippi overflows.
Yeah.
And it costs the government like $100 million to clean it up.
Yeah, they've got some serious issues they've got to address on the Mississippi River system, because you have both flooding every year, which costs money, and drought every year, which costs money in shipping. So they have issues with the Mississippi River both being too high and too low in the same year. So they've got to do some mitigation issues there. But I think what people don't realize is how small the Colorado River is compared to the Mississippi River, compared to tributaries of the Mississippi River, like the Ohio River and the Missouri.
Yeah.
I mean, those are rivers that are 10 times the size of the Colorado. And so we don't need much of their stormwater, but that's actually probably not even the first solution. That's the second solution. Because if you look at the two biggest users, it's at the two ends. It's the Colorado the state of Colorado agriculture, they use about a quarter of the river for that. And then it's California agriculture at the other end, which uses about a quarter of the river for that.
Let's talk about California for just
Yeah.
a minute. I love California. I love the folks that come here, and I love going to visit there. But they do seem to waste a lot of water, don't they?
Well, in the municipalities, and I think that's an easy target. Like our Bellagio fountains are an easy target. Now, I have talked with some regulators who have shown me some of the news coverage that's embarrassing for them of their citizens throwing a fit about things that we think are normal. Like they want massive fields of grass just to look at that are watered with Colorado River
Right.
water. We just don't have the water for that anymore. And I think the cities need to be smarter and lead by example. But the usage issue in its essence this is a farming issue.
Well, I don't mean the usage issue as much as all those rains they had.
Yeah.
They didn't capture that water like we do.
They capture some. Yeah.
But most of it goes back into the ocean. Now,
Right.
I went to a meeting, I think it was a LVGE, Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it was there where I was told that we, meaning Las Vegas Water Authority, is building a recyclable or a system like we have out there in the LA area.
Right.
And that we're getting more water in exchange for that.
Yes, because what we're learning is that if we can help California get the water that they're entitled to in the system, that will free up water in the system to allow it. That's the collaborative viewpoint that we need to have, which is if we help the senior most water rights holders meet their allocation, it is better than all of us. In the meantime, the waters for fighting part comes into play because we just don't have enough. And so for this year and for next year and for the year after, we're all going to have to tighten our belts and take a cut. And it's difficult because it's kind of scary when you live here and that's what you rely on to survive. But if you look at the flip side, people who say, well, cities are growing and the farmers are going to have to deal with that. Absolutely not, for a couple reasons. First of all, water rights are just that. They're rights. Like those are their senior rights. They were in line first. They have those rights. They own those rights. There's legal precedent for that. And it's important that we preserve that for the rule of law. But the second thing is it's a national security issue. Over 70% of the winter vegetables consumed in the United States are grown with Colorado River water. And so if you want your food supply to be secure, a domestic food supply, which we saw really clearly when every government shut down their borders during the pandemic, you see how critical it is to have the possibility and the capacity to have a winter vegetable and winter food supply grown domestically. And so we've got to secure it for that reason. The other thing is that if you look at other parts of the Colorado River system, specifically the lower basin, Arizona is in trouble. I mean, Arizona is our canary in the coal mine, where we can see that they already have, they're not just stopping issuing building permits. They have communities that have been built that have been cut off from water, and they now have to pay to truck in water. The news showed one family that had to build a 1,000-gallon system, and then they're paying significant money to have that water trucked in and filled up. And so they're very sparing. It's like watching what people do in that movie Dune, where they're very sparing with every drop of water because it's such a premium. And so their showers, they're watering any
So
plants
they don't have
have.
a system like we have.
Well, they were hooked up to Colorado River water.
No, I mean, we have the reclamation system.
We do, but that just returns water to the river that we have taken out of the river. So we get credit for our treated water, and they don't have that because they're so far inland. But the issue is their water rights are junior to the California water rights. So when the restrictions came in, their water rights were cut. So they used to have city water, which was Colorado River water, and then it just went dry one day. And so it is possible. It's happening next door, and we've got to start now, because any kind of fix, and a fix for the lower basin would be something like installing a pipeline that ran backwards up the Colorado to Yuma, Arizona, and took seawater from the Gulf of California and desalinated it. Because right in Yuma, Arizona, where California meets, there's a canal that starts right there. And if you look at it, it's massive. That canal takes a quarter of the river and sends it to the largest consumer, which is the Imperial Valley irrigation district. Those are the folks that grow all of our winter vegetables.
Okay.
And so their rights have got to be protected.
Yes.
And so getting them a pipeline first would essentially take them off of the river and get them a guaranteed supply that meets their water rights in full. And what that does for the rest of us is it allows the rest of the water to stay in the basin for our use, because we're basically, if we can replace first the water going into the All-American Canal in the south, and then second, the water that's being used by Colorado with a pipeline in the north, then we can hit it from both ends. One of them will fix our problems short term, two of them will fix our problems long term, and then you guarantee, what we've got to look at is the future and growth. If you look at Las Vegas today versus the Las Vegas when my wife was in grade school here, 10 times the population, 10 times. And so we've got to plan for that future.
Yeah, no, we do. I know that in Israel they use desalinization
Yes.
for agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do that because there's a lot of groups out there that are fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
What if, I didn't know about this meth down in the Gulf by the Baja. Is there water there? Is that a possibility? Or
Yeah. Well, it is seawater. It's in the Gulf of California, so that's the area between mainland Mexico and Baja, Mexico.
Yeah.
So, it goes out to the Pacific. I don't think that we would be able to get this through in California. They just voted against a second desalination plant that was exactly like another desalination plant they already have running.
Oh, they have one already.
They have one that's up and running. They were just going to copy it and double the capacity, and all of a sudden it was this huge environmental issue.
Yeah.
And so I think that working with the Mexican government, because the two things we can do with that pipeline are free up the allocation from the California All-American Canal and guarantee that the Imperial Valley district's getting their full allocation, and that makes it better for the rest of us. And then we can also help with the 10% that the country of Mexico gets off of the Colorado River system. And
Right.
so I think they'll be more amenable.
And Mexico's worked with us on this, haven't they?
Yes, they've been great partners.
Yeah,
They've been
that's what I
amazing
understand.
partners on this. Yeah.
What about the Olympia River up in Washington?
I've heard some talk about that, but most of what I've heard about that comes from the Utah legislature, because they're having issues with the Great Salt Lake is shrinking so much that it's going to start to have issues like they have with the Salton Sea. And that's the thing I don't think people realize, is it's more than just our water.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you've got huge ecological issues at the Salton Sea. You've got huge ecological issues that could emerge and are starting to emerge at the Great Salt Lake. And so they've talked about doing a study on a pipeline from the Pacific Northwest, which it fits this old saying I heard, which is America doesn't have a water problem, America has a plumbing problem.
Yeah.
And it's true. And then when people talk about the cost of building these pipelines, if you look at both the Alaska pipeline, which is massive and moves oil through one of the roughest terrains in the world, and then if you just look at the networks, like my family's farm in western Pennsylvania, we have a natural gas pipeline that literally cuts through the middle of it. It's 100 acres. There's a gas pipeline. There's this easement where there's no trees, and they maintain it, that it's cut through. And they just came to all the landowners. They said, this is something for the good of the country. We need to get this done. They purchased the land from us.
Well, when was that done?
They finished the pipeline on my parents' property about 10 years ago. It took about 3 years to build.
I'm a little cynical now, but in the last 10 years, people have gotten so less nice.
Yeah.
So less cooperative.
Yeah.
I don't. That's
We'll
a big
cover that on question 3. That's a big part of what Drew.
Well, listen, you're right. We could talk about water all day long,
Yeah.
and I love talking about water. I know that we have a handle on it as well as we can.
Yeah.
And I just want everyone else out there to know that we're doing all we can do, and we just need the citizens of Nevada to help out too. Look, we come from the Midwest. I used to love my lawn. I was proud of my lawn.
Oh yeah.
I don't have a lawn.
Yep.
I don't want a lawn.
Yep.
I spit on lawns. I hate lawns.
Yes.
So guess you got to be, we're in the desert.
Yeah.
If you're going to enjoy all we have to offer, work with us. Work with us on that. All right, let's talk a short bit and talk about, you were a big catalyst in getting recreational marijuana.
Yes. I actually started the campaign. There was a big group of people who got it done. There were a bunch of people who were activists that worked on it before I came into it. I was watching the polling for several years and then approached the national nonprofit that funded our initial push for signature gathering. So I was the only name on the ballot committee for the existence of the ballot committee. And then I was the spokesperson for the campaign. I am a medical marijuana patient, so it was personal for me. But I looked at it at both I look for opportunities for changes in politics where the government hasn't caught up to the people.
Yeah.
And marijuana was a classic example of that. And I spoke to the Council of State Governments West in Anchorage on this. And I had a legislator raise her hand, and she said, you worked at the legislature for 10 years, and you're kind of turning your back on us, and you're going around us with this ballot measure. How can you do that? And I said, well, you'll never get it done. Because the thing is, every elected official, whether a Democrat, Republican, Green Party, they all have the same two priorities: get elected or reelected, do the right thing. They differ on
do the
how.
right thing.
That's the second priority. Well, they all have their definition of the right thing.
Okay, thank you.
And so, but they want to get elected or reelected and then do the right thing. Well, the problem is they've learned that doing nothing is so much better in the eyes of the voters than doing the wrong thing. And they were afraid of doing the wrong thing on marijuana, but the people were ahead of them. And so we found that issue, and we also found people who were willing and able to fund the campaign. That was very helpful. And so we managed that in 2016. We've had recreational marijuana ever since, and we continue to fine-tune the system. With consumption lounges coming online right now. The first one's just opened, Smoke and Mirrors, and then there's Nuwu.
It's on the Strip, isn't it? Or near the Strip?
I believe it's downtown.
Oh, downtown, okay.
But I actually have not been there yet. I've been to the one Nuwu, which is at the tribal location just north of downtown.
Okay.
It's about a block north of the Main Street station.
And the United States government needs to get together. I mean, marijuana is still a Class 1 drug.
It is.
In the same category as heroin.
It's absolutely
It's
crazy.
unbelievable.
It is. 27 states are recreational. The federal government, it's a big ship, and it takes a while to turn, but this is getting embarrassing.
Isn't it?
This is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it really is. We got an election coming up, and I don't care. I don't want to talk about the national because the whole thing's a mess. But I guess I was just talking to Patty. I was hoping that maybe somehow we could find two people under 70 to run. Would that be nice? Forget about it. But in the meantime, we've got a lot going on in the state coming
Yes.
up.
Yeah.
Can you take a few minutes to talk about what's happening here?
It's going to be a huge year in Nevada.
And you that's part of what you do. You work on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It was looking like we were going to have some tough races and competitive races in the congressional races, and that's looking less likely now. Those are looking like they're going to lean more toward the incumbents. Depending on how the primary goes, the U.S. Senate race could be very competitive. If it's Sam Brown versus Jackie Rosen, it will be a very competitive race,
Okay.
which means it'll be very high budget.
I see a lot of Sam Brown's advertisements.
Yeah, he's got some interest groups that they seem to believe that he's the best position to win a general election, but he's got competition in the primary election. They don't have quite the budget that he has for advertising, but one of his primary competitors, Jim Marchant, won a statewide primary 4 years ago, running for Secretary of State. So it's a real threat there. So kind of wait and see on that one to see who turns out. But what's beyond any question is that the presidential race will be very competitive here. So you're going to see 20, 30, 40, $50 million spent on turnout by the two presidential races and the state parties and all of the allied and affiliated groups. So there's going to be a lot of intense pressure and fighting for the presidential race. And then that will have a lot of other groups kind of trying to catch those coattails and get their agenda through. There's also a huge fight for control of the legislature right now. Not for control of the majority of the legislature, but for control of a supermajority of the legislature.
Right.
Because the Democrats,
They have a supermajority now, don't they?
they have a supermajority in the assembly,
Okay.
and it appears almost certain that they will get a supermajority in the Senate this year, in the state Senate, but they may lose the supermajority in the Assembly because the Assembly is always in play because all of the seats are always up. So that is going to be very hard fought because most of the political interests in Nevada seem to agree that if you look at any state where the legislature has 2/3, things don't go well.
That's what I was going to ask. It seems that way. Look, I'm not a fan of politics at all, or politicians at all, but to have a supermajority can't be good, is it?
Yeah,
It's
well,
good for one side,
yeah.
but nothing gets done.
Nothing gets done or the wrong things get done because what you end up with is a civil war within that party because the people on the fringe of that party go, this is my chance. If I'm not, and one thing they're saying that's correct is if I'm ever going to get it done, it's now. And they're correct in that. The problem is like literally 80% of the electorate doesn't want what they're selling on the two sides, on the two far extremes. The ideas that they have are unpalatable to the 60, 70% of the people in the middle. And so that's the danger. And again, this dovetails into question 3, but that's the danger of the current system is the team politics between the two major parties is tearing us apart and making us hate each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the root of the problem, and that's why I signed on to question 3. I worked as the campaign manager for the ballot measure qualification. So Nevada's a really hard, I got to pat myself on the back a little. Nevada's a really hard state to qualify a ballot measure. And so in 2016 with marijuana and in 2022 with question 3, we went 2 out of 2. I mean, this is there were 8 ballot measures that were circulating paper last time. Ours was the only one to make it across the finish line. And so I was the campaign manager for that portion, and then for the first campaign. But since it's a constitutional amendment, it has to pass twice.
That's what's crazy. By the way, Joe made me famous because I can't tell you know it, but I mean, that commercial with. I was at a networking event. Mm-hmm. It was through one of the affiliates, Realtor affiliates. I forget which one it was. And I'm sitting at this bar, and some girl, I don't know who she is. She goes, "Oh, you're the guy from the TV commercial," and it was already over 2-3 months ago.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about 3.
Yeah.
And the question I also have is, I don't understand this 2 times. It has to win twice.
Well, it's because it's a constitutional amendment. It's actually really good that constitutional amendments are hard to pass.
Is it going to be on the ballot this year?
Yes.
It is.
And so if it passes this year, it's done. It's in the Constitution.
Okay.
Which
So talk
means
about 3.
It's good that they have to do it twice because we should take it very seriously when we put things in the Constitution. However, there's no requirement in the Constitution to have a majority to win.
Oh.
And this law puts in the requirement that you have to have a majority of votes to win.
Okay.
So we have to change the Constitution.
Okay.
And so it has to be a constitutional amendment. I signed on to yes on 3. Again, this is my second statewide ballot measure, and it's again for personal reasons. It's something where I've been working in this system for so long. I think my mom was actually relieved when I started working in marijuana because she could say that I was a drug dealer instead of a politician, and it was kind of like increasing my status
That's a great
little
one.
bit. But it's something where watching us stand in the corner and stare at other people from Nevada and other people from Las Vegas and say that they're un-American and say that they don't care about this country because generally speaking, they think like we do and want what we want, but have a different way of getting to the goal.
Yeah.
I can't take that anymore. And I honestly think that the framers were right when they said, what do you have? A democracy if you can keep it. I mean, this is the youngest and most fragile form of government in the history of mankind. If you look at the history of mankind, the most common form of government is tyranny and dictatorship. And so this is a fragile, relatively recent experiment. And if we knock it around too much, we're going to lose it. And so I think the stakes are that high. And I think that question 3 fixes a lot of problems that desperately need to be fixed. And if anyone listening has never read the book Freakonomics, go buy the book Freakonomics and read the book Freakonomics because it explains so much about human nature. But if you distill that book down to one sentence, it is human beings respond to incentives. When you create an incentive for someone that's negative, they don't want to do that. When you create an incentive for someone that's positive, they do want to do that. Well, if you look at the incentives in our political system, people say all the time that the political system is broken. It's not broken at all. It's working exactly how it's designed to work. It's just the system is rigged. And so we have this rigged system that is set up to get exactly the result we have today. If you look at the primary system, we're set up to limit the number of people who can vote on the first round. And so 640,000 Nevadans are like me, they're registered nonpartisan.
Me too.
And they can't participate. Like,
right.
What did you get to do in the presidential primary? Nothing.
No.
There's no option for us.
Right.
And so we get left with what the two parties in their closed primary systems give us. And those are our only choices. That's the first flaw that question 3 fixes. The second flaw that question 3 fixes is it has really become apparent that if you have a top 2 system, it incentivizes negative campaigning. Because if it's me against you, then I can win two ways: by convincing people that I'm good and convincing people that you're bad. And so when a top two system has an inherent flaw that incentivizes negativity and infighting and the mess that we have now, having a top five system like we have in question 3 makes it so that if one person is attacking the other 4 people, you figure out who the bad one is real quick. And so with open primaries, which question 3 will give us, those 640,000 people will now be able to vote because we can all vote in one primary. And for me, that's great because people have said to me before, why don't you just pick a side and register that year? And you can change, you can register same day and you can change the next day. Well, honestly, it's because sometimes I have strong feelings about a Democrat that I don't like in one race. And then, so I may have a U.S. Senate candidate, like I may hate Jackie Rosen. I don't, but I may just not like her at all. And I may want to vote against her. And I may want to vote against her in the primary. Well, that's a Democratic primary. And then I may think that my assembly candidate in my home district is great, the Republican that's running, this kid who's just trying this out, and I want to support him. Well, you can't do that. You can't vote in.
But you can't vote in both, can you?
Right. But if you have one primary where all of your races are on one primary, you can vote for the people that you believe in most. So it's taking power away from party bosses and giving it back to people. The incentive for these candidates becomes appealing to the majority of people in their district. And then when we go to the top 5 ranked choice voting, that allows you to lessen negative campaigning because you have a pool of 5 to choose from instead of a pool of 1. Makes it logistically more difficult to negatively campaign. The other thing that we saw come about as an unintended consequence is it's an incentive for consensus building because people realized if I don't make it on the first round, I need other people to like me. And so you see like-minded candidates campaigning together saying, make me your second choice. Okay. It's how Mary Peltola won in Alaska. And Alaska is a great example of how this works and how it proves wrong the criticism where people say, well, that helps Republicans or that helps Democrats. It helps the people. It gives the power back to the people. Alaska's governor is a Trump Republican. Alaska's U.S. senator is a never-Trump Republican, and Alaska's lone member of Congress is a Native American Democrat. And it's because the Native American Democrat is a blue dog who's actually conservative, and she's great on salmon. She knows more about salmon than any elected official in the history of Alaska, and people respond to that. Sure. And Lisa Murkowski has been a diehard advocate for Alaska first, and people recognize that. And then the Trump Republican governor speaks the same language as most of the people in the state who support Trump. And so you get leadership that isn't one flavor or another. It's a leadership that people want. And so the limited example we have of this being in place, which is Alaska, it really works. And then if you look at the shenanigans that just happened in the California Senate race, Adam Schiff just spent a ton of money to get Garvey, the Republican, into second place over the other Democrats because Garvey doesn't have a chance in
so he spent money to get. He wanted Garvey as his opponent.
Instead of the people picking the elected officials.
Yep.
The elected officials are picking their voters.
Isn't that something?
And so he wanted to pick the voters that would oppose Garvey, and so he helped Garvey get across the finish line so that it's now. I mean, Adam Schiff could go on vacation for the next 6 months and he'll win that election.
Yeah. See, that's something that's always bothered me. And I'm going to jump back to 3 about the people playing a little nicer.
Yeah.
In '92, I couldn't decide, and I wasn't a Bush fan, I wasn't a Clinton fan at the time, so I threw it away and voted for Perot. And I thought then, because the guy was a billionaire, and I knew he wasn't going to win, I thought if he would have taken his money and actually formed a legitimate third party, not the Libertarian or the Green Party, and we had 3 real. Aren't we one of the only countries that have only 2 major parties?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If we had 3 parties, just like you said, right now the Democrats, all they care about is messing with the Republicans with the Democrats. If there was a third party, you'd have to play nicer.
Yeah. Yeah, or just if independents had a chance, if we had a chance for people who chose not to have a party affiliation, and that's what I think question 3 does, is it opens up, because you've got to make the top 4 to make it to the general election, or the top 5 here in Alaska, they do top 4 in a write-in, but in Nevada you'll have to make the top 5 to make the general election. Well, most of your decent candidates, even if they're independents, are going to make the top 5, and then you can have an honest conversation about, whose team are these legislators really on? Are they on their state party's team, either side? And I'm not saying that one party is good or one party is bad. I think they're both bad.
Oh, I do too.
I hate one of them slightly more than the other, but I hate them both very much.
I'm with you,
and
Joe.
it's because I blame them for the mess that we have now. And I truly believe that voting yes on 3 fixes that.
Yeah, well, good. I think we're short on time. We are. But listen, I'd love you to come back again sometime, because this was fantastic. I always love listening to you, and Rocky was in our office a couple weeks ago, but you guys do just a fantastic job for us, and we really appreciate it. Listen, folks, have a great weekend. Again, please go against the grain and be nice to everybody for this weekend, and go Rebels. This is a big game tonight, tomorrow against Nevada. Joe, thank you, man.
Thanks. See ya.
Appreciate it. Beta, thank you for everything. See y'all later. Bye-bye.